All right, good morning and welcome to our channel. Today I'm going to be discussing the work requirements and time limits for Section 8. We have roughly 75 days left, up to 75, before they're going to be considering Congress pushing through policies and new rules for the time limits and work requirements. And I had to go to the Federal Register to get this. What I'm going to do, guys, I'm going to link you up here in live chat. I'm also going to provide the linkage to the Federal Register so you can look at this for yourself. I did some extensive research and built out a summary report, which I'm going to go over with you guys today. Keep in mind, Congress can add and remove as they wish, but this is the final draft part. So we're going to go over a factual basis of what's being discussed in terms of this, along with the exemptions. So under the Federal Register, you have Title 24, CFR Parts 5, 960, 982, and 983. And this will be establishing flexibility for implementation of work requirements and term limits. Now, looking at this will be, as I had mentioned in previous video, I think last night, that we have to look at how this will likely play out. And the more than half of people that are presently in federal programs that house them, whether it be Section 8, project-based, tenant-based, tax credit properties across the board, this will be implemented. One key strategy point of this is, and reading through the language, is if the housing, they're going to leave it up to the housing authority itself to implement these rules. And it appears that these rules can be quite different for every single housing authority. So the knowledge of this is not broad. In other words, if you were living and working somewhere in Mississippi, and or maybe you live in New York, rules will be very different for each PHA. But the administration has made one thing very clear: uh, if the housing authority is in receivership, otherwise been accused of fraud, mismanagement, or a number of other issues that conflict, they will not be able to implement this, which is good news for most of you, because let's think of very carefully a few thousand videos back, how many housing authorities have been in the hot box already. A lot of them are under investigation. So even if successful, the good news is, with the level of fraud and mismanagement between more than 4,300 housing authorities, I'm wondering how many of them would ever even qualify to be able to implement these particular rules. So I think it's interesting, because that one caveat could be the saving grace for many of you. If your housing authority is known in the community as being a scumbag, then they quite possibly will not be able to even implement these rules at their levels. So let's go over what those things are. And I'm sure you guys have lots to say about all the fantastic relationships you have with your housing authorities and the workers that probably have treated you so bad. But let's go over this. I've had to take notes, guys. Look, I'm an expert at many things, and I did work at the federal level for 26 years as a consultant, and I've helped probably over 22,000 people, as you can see our company information in the video description, so on. But when it comes to this, I prefer reading through notes. Okay, so I'm gonna pull this up real quick. So first up, summary of work requirements and time limits on March 2nd, 2026 was the first rollout of the Federal Register for this, at least the implemented rules. And so housing programs potentially affected, if the housing authorities are granted the power to do so, would be housing choice vouchers, project-based vouchers, public housing, and Section 8 project-based rental assistance. So that's the vast majority. Let's say about 90%, okay, as a rather bold number. Moving on, their local housing authorities and eligible property owners could decide whether to adopt these policies. They would not be required to implement them. That's an important statement here. So again, if the housing authority has been engaged in a negative relationship with the U.S. government, they will not be able to implement them. Number two, the housing authority, even if they're in good standing, does not have to implement this. So this will not be a curtain sweep across the U.S. in terms of this, which is good. And when we look at the linkage that I've given you there in a live chat, from the beginning, it was broad. They were planning on putting this at the federal level. Now they've changed, shift gears, and shot it down to the PHAs, but only if they're operating ethically. And even then, they still have the option not to implement it at all. So that's going to be extremely hopeful And in short, this will not be a broad sweep of all programs for every single PHA. So local housing authorities and eligible property owners could decide whether to adopt these policies I mentioned. And also, I'm not quite sure how this works out into private landlords having that option, but I do know one thing. For the private landlords, what I mean is not your local grandma and grandpa renting your property. When I say private landlords, I mean big tax credit properties with four or more units. Okay. I'm not talking about your neighborhood landlord that's just simply going to rent a unit or two. We're talking about larger properties, mostly under tax credit. Okay. So just to be clear, these powers are not going to be granted to just every private landlord in town. Uh, Proposed work requirements. The housing authority and owners could require work eligible adults and to participate in approved activities up to 40 hours a week. Approved activities could include regular subsidized employment, self-employment on the keynote, self-employment. You know, if you can prove that you have a little business, on the job training, vocational education, and job searches and job readiness programs, work experience programs, community service, certain secondary education programs, and providing childcare for somebody participating in a community service. So there is a wide range of activities that are considered useful in those 40 hours. The housing authority could require fewer than 40 hours and determine whether the requirement applies to all work eligible adults. And that's the key metric here is work eligible adults, not disabled. So if you're disabled, then you are not in part of this. Okay. For those who would generally be exempt, the proposal defines work eligible persons covers assisted housing household members age 18 to 61. You are exempted if you are 62 years and older. You are exempted if you have a qualified provable disability. Okay. Also, people with that are primary caretakers of people with disabilities. If you have somebody in your household composition that is disabled and you are a care aide or a registered aide of some sort to help them, you are not required under the federal participation for work requirements. If you are pregnant, you are not, you are exempted. Let's see, primary caretakers of children under the age of 6. If you have a voucher and you have at least one child that is under the age of 6, you are not required to meet this requirement. Caretakers of temporarily incapacitated people, so people that have been injured, hospitalized, or otherwise have other serious medical issues, and you are the primary caretaker, you are exempted. Qualifying college students, if you are up to age, I think 24, okay, and I don't have exact language on it yet, but I believe up to age 24 and you are in college and it has not clarified whether or not you need to be full-time, part-time and all that. So we're just going to talk in broad terms. You're not, you don't have to do this. Okay. So you're exempted. Proposed time limits. Here's where it gets sticky. Housing authorities and owners, and when I say owners, we don't mean specifically private landlords. We mean tax credit properties that likely have anywhere from 5 to 100 units. Okay. Housing authorities and owners could limit assistance for non-elderly, non-disabled families. The time limits cannot be shorter than 2 years, but local agencies could establish longer limits. So the time limit, the minimum threshold is 2 years, and there isn't a maximum. However, I would imagine if you're operating a business as a housing authority, it would be probably in their interest to put time caps somewhere between 2 and 4 years. And I think that is symptomatic of the system right now that I think most that are allowed to PHAs or tax credit properties that are considering any form of time limit would range it between 2 to 4 years that don't meet these rules. Important protections include time already spent receiving assistance before the policy's effective date would not count. Families would receive at least 3 months notice for implementation. So they give you a running start. So if this rolls out, you have 90 days to worry about it, and then the game begins. And I would imagine as the process begins, you'd have to sign some paperwork, and then there would be some form of formal plan in place, and then you would be told about the work requirements and time limits if implemented. And keep in mind, as we re-roll the conversation, Not every housing authority and private tax credit property is likely to implement this. And if either party is in trouble and found to be by HUD itself, the federal agency, to be deficient under federal rules, they will not be allowed these extraordinary rules and policies. Okay. Families would receive additional notice if when they are within 12 months and again at 6 months of reaching the limit. So they give you fair notice at 12 months and again at 6 months at the end of your time limit. So if you have a 2 year time limit, they will notify you after 1 year and then again at the 6 month mark before they boot you out. Okay. I do not know if you could reapply and then jump back in the system for an additional time. I can tell you one thing as a consultant looking at how best to help families and the potential for exploitation of this, it would make a lot of sense to understand that if we implement the rules this way, any clever person would realize very quickly that if your housing authority is implementing time limits, I can tell you what's going to happen. Okay. People are not stupid. So let's talk about this realistically. If your housing authority or a private landlord's got work requirements and time limits, and you know down the street, say maybe in Detroit, that over there they're poorly managed and don't follow and cooperate with HUD's rules, so therefore they don't have those rules, you know what people are going to do, right? Everybody's going to be porting to a different, they're going to be moving to a different landlord, or they're going to be porting that fucking voucher to a different housing authority where they know that they don't have those powers. And so it's going to be a game of whack-a-mole, right? That's what I would do as a consultant. If you have a problem that's going to affect the client, then my job objectively to be okay. Well, HUD said that any housing authority that isn't cooperating in receivership or otherwise in trouble can't implement these rules. Well, congratulations. I'm going to need my client to pack your shit because we're going to be porting you to a housing authority locally nearby that probably is not going to be able to implement these rules. Same thing with private landlords. If landlord A has got time limits and work requirements through their tax credit properties, then we'll be doing a very comfortable search, whether it's countywide or statewide, to determine which one of these private tax credit properties simply have operated below the radar of HUD and do not have the ability to implement these rules. You see, so there's always a workaround. I deal in nothing but loopholes. That's been my entire career. It's trying to push the circle through the square, right? So I can already see that despite all those good Harvard and Yale students writing up this nonsense policy, it's filled with fucking loopholes. Okay. I can just tell you that right now. I'm already examining. There's gaping holes all in this. So it's going to be a wild ride the first couple of years if this is implemented, because my entire job will be to reverse engineer virtually every part of this for clients. So moving on from there, let's jump back in there and talk again in real terms. Important protections include time limits already receiving assistance before the effective date would not count. Families would receive at least 3 months' notice. The 6 month and 12-month warning at the end. Elderly and disabled families could not be subject and will not be subject to these time limits. Families could reapply for assistance. Okay, so there is the declaration. You can apply again. So you may restart the game again, but I think that kind of spells to what we've already considered. You can reapply or you can simply go to a housing authority where you know they can't do this. And so, yeah, this has not been very well thought out. And so I'm very pleased to be able to present it in this fashion. Special purpose voucher. Let's talk about that real quick. So HUD Bash, no work requirements or time limits on veterans. Let's see, FUP or for youth or FYI, work requirements could be imposed, but no additional time limits. Mainstream and stability vouchers, local agencies could potentially impose work requirements and time limits. And HCV home ownership, a housing authority could potentially apply either a policy through it or choose to exempt ownership programs from the limits. Let me tell you something, guys. If you're engaged in home ownership or you get in home ownership, there's no way to realistically implement this. Once somebody owns a property, you can't time limit that. Okay. So I don't even know why there's language in there. Clearly, somebody was drunk and passed out when they wrote this particular part. Once somebody goes on underwriting and participates in HUD homeownership and they own the property, you're not going to be able to time limit or work required somebody's ass. Okay, it just doesn't work out. I don't see how that will ever conceivably work. So, not only that, but it would further convolute things and it would create a higher or greater administrative burden for both the PHA and the person in homeownership. So, I don't see that this will be a high point of the implementation. All right, taking a small little breather here. Local implementation and requirements before adopting these policies, the housing authority would generally have to. Oh, got a kiki here, scratching my leg. Anybody want to see Diamond this morning? She is here today. If y'all like cats, she just clawed my leg. She's looking for trouble this morning. I can tell you. Come here, man. Oh, out of my four cats, she's the only one that's not sick. So here's Miss Diamond. Say hello to the audience. Yep, she's a busybody today. So I'm gonna let her loose, and she'll probably go and tear down the blinds or something in the background. Anyways, before adopting these policies, the housing authority would generally have to add a policy to its PHA plan. So, in other words, the administrative plan would have to be rewritten, reapproved through HUD. So, it looks like there's going to be a little bit of time, anyways, because that's a costly affair for a PHA to have to rewrite their administrative plan to adopt new policies like this. And so, we could see some further delay through any PHA with the intent to actually carry through with these policies. Conduct the required public process, including public hearings and comments. That too could ultimately push a lot of this out another additional year. Define who is covered and qualified activities, require hours and documentation. So they would need to rebuild their internal auditing system for people in programs. And then, of course, they would need to audit everybody that's already a participant in any of the programs they carry and explain the consequences of noncompliance. So it will be a cost burden ultimately to this. All right, moving on down to the comments here, guys. I'm going to leave these notes in the comment section of this video. This will be a summary statement of Federal Register. And again, this is going to be the Federal Register for 24 CFR 5, 960, and 982, and 983. And I'm going to post that link again. Skokie Land, looks like you're having some fun there in my live chat. Lots of chitter chat. And then the summary notes will go after this live video ends. So let me say some good mornings. Sheila Neal, good morning, Jay, and everyone. And Charity Man, it looks like you got your message retracted. Cutie Pie, good morning. Charity Man, good morning. Susan Wells, good morning, Jay, and thank you. Muskogee Land is watching. Muskogee goes on to say a bunch of different things. Let's see. All this is becoming a huge shit show. They are kicking people off of SSDI and SSI. You basically have to be in a nursing home. Well, I don't I don't agree or disagree on that. Clearly, I don't deal in the federal agency. I only deal with federal housing. So I don't know what to say to that sentiment, other than it doesn't sound good. If that certainly is true, don't ever say you're getting better or doing daily life tasks. Sound like you're probably having a bad morning. I can share that sentiment with you, Muskogee Land. I'm going on to get HUD home ownership as soon as possible. Well, home ownership may be a more difficult process in the next 2 years. Given all the changes and almost every virtual part of housing Section 8 and programs have been attacked. We discussed that last night. Since the administration began, it has been their absolute goal to downsize housing Section 8 and so on. And so they started with firing nearly 10,000 people from HUD, selling the building. From that, it moved to killing $4 billion in funding for every known homeless person, and then putting them into psychiatric care and drug facilities is the plan there. 20% of reduction year over year in funding. The administration made it very clear they're not going to fund not one additional penny for a new voucher. They're only willing to budget and kick out a budget to maintain what's in place. They're not interested in engaging in any further expansion of this. In fact, we are watching the shrinkage of this. And then, of course, when you roll out work requirements and time limits, if implemented strongly across the U.S., it would kick out roughly half of all people likely in the system. And I know there are those of you that are for and those that are against. And so, as stated through the policies in the Federal Register, today's been an eye-opening episode of what's being considered, and I'm more concerned of housing authorities being ultimately the people in control of this. There's already a lot of behavior that it falls in predatory lines with PHAs violating people's rights, and so when you give them these kind of extraordinary war powers on a damn Section 8 voucher, then my concern is how much oversight will be in place. And if we're talking oversight, what happens when you fire 90% of HUD's employees that no longer can investigate? So, we talked about the collapse of the system. It's just like a house built on 4 post support beams. Each one of these different things that have been implemented kicks and breaks one of those support beams. 3 or 4 are gone. Time limits and work requirements would be the third leg. Now you have a house surviving on one support beam, and we have 900 days left. Any further, you know, to me, logically looking at this, it really is a collapse of the system. 75% of what it really is vanished. That's just the reality of what it is. And what remains is under attack and will remain under attack all the way to the very end. Housing authorities now under investigations and the time limits, work requirements, uh, the collapse of HUD pretty much. And now they're HUD itself with up the big building is now in a little rental office. You might as well not much bigger than a U-Haul building, right? So here we are. And so we're probably surviving. For those of you that participate in federal programs, you're probably surviving some of the toughest administrative policies ever known for this. And they're rather contentious at times because they don't ever seem to stop. After October, then a new set of considerations will be done. The president is not busy with wars really anymore, and and so his attention has been refocused on this agency. And it would appear that the overall plan from the beginning was to dissolve the vast majority of what HUD is, if not get rid of it altogether. In fact, when they talked about block grant process, that was to completely eliminate HUD and to simply make it an issue for the state to do. In other words, the president wanted to get rid of Section 8 altogether and just offer some federal dollars towards it and then have the state manage it on its own. So make no mistake, if there's ever somebody taking a shot across the bow of your ship, this is it. I mean, state block grant and the way that was proposed and set up, which didn't end up happening, made it very clear that the president does not want Section 8 to exist in any form. And so while it has been argued in court in many other ways, largely he has not been successful in first rounds, but rather the president would find other ways. So if he fails from one perspective, he rehashes the war a different way and then he goes around. And so, since the state block grant didn't get approved by Congress, he's attacking this in pieces, smaller pieces. And he's been rather successful in doing it that way. He learns from the one failure and then he finds a back door and is able to implement stronger policies. And little by little, the system is being whittled down to virtually nothing. In the end, I would imagine that the only people that would be able to apply or even possess a voucher given enough time of this deconstruction of the system would be those that are 62 or those that are disabled and, of course, veterans. But the vast majority of other people simply, there's no way, And so we have another 900 days of additional sustained changes that are potentially coming. And I don't think the administration is going to be complete with their plans with this until there is a virtual large portion of this collapsed and got rid of. And I don't know that any incoming administration in the future is going to want to put on their voting ticket, they're going to rebuild all this. So we're looking at an end of a generation or two of this, and its reformation is something much smaller with a very limited scope. And so I'm afraid that that is the case. You're welcome to derive your own conclusion. Obviously, do your own research and determine what you fundamentally believe. It doesn't have to be about what I'm suggesting here. So I did provide linkage there. And let me get back in the comments here. Charity Man, Tangs and Simpson, good morning. Sheila Neal, question: housing funding will be ending in 2027. No, there's never an ending of funding. There's just extreme limitation. Okay. Let me be very clear about this. So me working at the federal level 26 years as a consultant, most of the people that you guys are watching are what we call entertainers, okay, on YouTube. They make videos about the ending of funding. Okay. These are the same people you hire for your 6-year-old. It's called the party clown. And it gets on YouTube. It makes videos. It's not a consultant. It doesn't understand policies and procedures. And we have a lot of rodeo clowns, okay, that are on YouTube talking about shit they don't understand. And that's why you guys have got caught up in this idea that everything's going to end in 2027. No, this is more like a slow, imagine President Trump putting his hands around your neck and slowly strangling you. Okay. That's what's happening to Section 8. Okay. It's nothing personal, it's just business. We're slowly strangling Section 8 till the life leaves it. And then what remains will be the program. And so, how else could you possibly view those? Uh, maybe the next elected president will decide to have some mercy. I don't know. Okay. I know one thing with President Trump, he operates things more like a business. Even his wars are always in a thought of business, right? Everything's a business. It makes money or it loses money. If you look at almost everything that he does, it's carried out contentiously like a business, which is great for sometimes economic issues, but it becomes kind of dangerous when you're dealing with people because people cannot be organized like a business and nor can their social needs. But that again is me sharing my personal venture and opinion. Moving on down, CD away says HUD is still not housing Americans in Texas, but they're still housing illegals and asylum seekers and refugees. I can tell you that that would be a directly against the mandate of the president, but nothing's perfect. So I cannot confirm or deny that statement, nor can I agree or disagree with it. But thank you for bringing that up. Um, Margaret Harris, good morning, Jay. Well, good morning to you as well. Muscogee Land, thank you for keeping us informed despite your health problems and cats. Well, we all got health problems in cats. I'm not the only one. I'm in a better mood than I was last night. There are days where it's just not very good, right? Glitz Glider, Grand Rising to you reading this. Well, thank you. That's in a very old school term. So I know you come from the old school. CD Away says the states are stealing. I'm not quite sure to what context you're referencing there. So, but thank you for bringing it up. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap it up. What I'm going to do, for many of you that like to get to the point, I'm going to post the exact conversation for this video in the bottom. It'll bullet point everything for you, along with linkage, so you can verify directly through the Federal Register itself to make things simple for you guys. And we will see you guys again in a day or two because I have to, I'm coming partially out of retirement. The government has seen fit to ensure that I work till I die. So here we carry on. So, we all have crosses to bear. It appears that even though I'm sick and have attempted to retire, I will not be permitted to do so. Not when everything is 20 times the cost it was before me trying to retire. Uh, in other news, we lost Grandma Gracie. She died. She died this morning. Also, that's one of the 4 cats I mentioned last night. So her 26-year reign came to an end, and it was because I deemed it necessary because she was going through complete organ failure of what we believe to be poisoning. Right now, two additional cats are in the hospital down the road. Pops and Little Mama, which are between 7 and 12 years old, and they also are going through the same thing. It appears that one of my bittersweet neighbors may have put out poison, It has affected a large number of neighbors. I've got the Harris County Sheriff's Office involved, and I can assure you, before the day is long, that person, I will, I will figure out who did it, one way or another. And I can assure you, when I get through with them court, I will dissolve every fucking asset they ever had. I will make a public spectacle. I will put them under a media packet, and I will expose that piece of shit. Um, you cannot just put out arsenic and different things and poison the entire neighborhood. And that's what they've done. So we have people that are psychopaths. It's taken out three quarters, it's about to take out three quarters of the cats I have that did nothing to this person. But we have limitations in the state of Texas where we can go. So we're going to continue to investigate, and I'm also going to hire a private investigator to contentiously look at each and every neighbor I've got until we figure out who the fuck is doing this. For now, my remaining cat, Diamond, will remain inside. We live in a world where there seems to be a couple parallel realities. There are people that want to live and operate normally. There are people that live in some type of private hell, and they try to administrate that pain to others and animals. And it's happened to here, and it's been one of the most devastating things I've ever faced in my life. Having to watch almost all my pets slowly die because somebody decided that it was inconvenient uh, to have them around. To be frank with you, if we lived in the 1800s, I would find that neighborhood and that neighbor, and I would take arsenic and pour it down his fucking throat. You know, uh, I would I would engage in a pattern of abuse of that person for roughly 2 weeks until their life left them. There would be no easy exit. But I'm not afforded those options in modern times without probably being committed to a prison. So I have to apply pain to this person that's done this in a different way and through lawsuits to ensure that the only thing they have left is a tent and a forest. Because I will dissolve every fucking asset if I have to sue for everything they've got, put liens and holes in all their homes, property, everything until there's nothing left of them. I'm not going to, it won't stop because there's no reason to ever do this. Not only that, but it's killed some of the wildlife out here. And so we're still trying to determine environmental or poisoning, but I'm very determined to figure it out because these pets are like my children. They are my children, right? I don't have real ones, so they serve that need. So the reason I'm bringing it up is I'm bringing awareness. There are very fucking evil people that exist in our plateau. Okay, be mindful at all times of your kids, your pets, and everything. There are people that wander the earth that will do extraordinary harm. If for no other greater cause than their single-minded way, and here we are. Not only that, but all this will cost me extraordinary costs, and so I have to come out of retirement now. So, anyways, I don't like to bring dark and ugly news, but that is the reality of where we landed with this, and I'm still in a state of shock, which means I can't even emotionally process what's really happening right now, nor do I feel it's directed. I would like to know very much this is just an environmental issue, and that it was just an accident. But if I find out it wasn't, I can tell you the closest thing to hell will be me. I will not stop. I will make it my personal mission to destroy any person that is engaged in that pattern. So that's just the way I feel about it. Okay. Guys, I've enjoyed talking with you. Tomorrow's going to be a 6 to 9 minute video of me discussing yet another thing. And what I'd like to do tomorrow is discuss probably the top 20 states and that are easiest to apply on the shortest waiting list to kind of help you guys understand where are better places in America to be and then be able to utilize this program as a savings or benefit to you if you're low income, retiring, or even disabled. We're in a different frame, we're in a different range of time these days. A lot of us are having to get cozy with the idea that where we have always lived may not be available anymore. A lot of people that are in New York and LA and parts of Florida are being priced out the market at a magnificent rate. And though you love to stay because you got your doctors there and you got this there, you got your family there, it may not be economic. It may lead to you bankrupting and becoming homeless if you stick to that gun, right? So I'm telling you that it's important to start looking at a couple material ways to make a sacrifice, at least till things get better. Okay. And so we're going to look at the top 20 states. That's roughly what, a third of America, right? Or even close to half. And we're going to look at the cities and see what might be a temporary reprieve in some of the most difficult times in US history. And make no mistake, I've lived over half a century. Many of you lived three-quarters of a century to watch my channel. Do these look like perfect times? The only people being fucking served right now are the wealthy and the upper middle class. If you are middle class, you are low class, you got no money, or you're low income, you're not being served. You can't even afford shit. You're having to worry about what the price of toilet paper is these days. So no, I don't. I'm ready for this shit to be over. 900 days can't happen quickly enough for me. I'll take anybody. It could be a staunch Republican. It could be a crazy independent. It could be a Democrat. I don't care. I'll take anything at this point other than what we're going through. And again, I don't specifically blame President Trump, but it ain't going well. Okay. That one, it only services half the country and half that don't matter. People that have already got. Things are getting too extreme and the pressures are becoming extraordinary. Yeah, the country's making money. People finding jobs, but ain't nobody got no fucking money. The middle class and the low income are the people that make this country. Why? Because a smaller percentage of what this nation is are the wealthy. How they only represent what, 5 to 10% of the people in America? What about all the other fucking people that can't afford nothing? So we haven't fixed shit. What we've done is we made this shit worse. You know, we're still living. We don't have a pandemic, but we're living in pandemic times, right? So yeah, we can't blow a lot of the country's money, but we ain't getting anywhere. And so I'm ready for all this shit to be over. To be honest with you, I'm one or two videos off of going on tirades about this whole fucking game being over. You know, it's more than just housing and Section 8. I'm just done with this shit. I need for somebody else to get in that office and do something different. We cannot continue to go to gas at $20 a gallon. Okay. Somebody's actually got to get in there and fucking do something other than make deals and wars and everything else. You know, this is not a playground, it's a country. So I'm reaching my upper limit of being judicious in my comments. Seriously, I'm reaching my final limit with all this shit. So with that being said, guys, I'm gonna leave this video before I say some things that I'm gonna regret. Okay. And I already read a few of them, but I'm reaching my personal limit with this. All right, guys, enjoy your morning. We'll see you tomorrow. We're gonna talk about those top 20 states and at least two cities in each one of those states that might be an ideal option for those that are almost about to bankrupt because of the economy for those that are middle class and low income. Thank you. Have a great day.